As a current Master of Business student at Baylor University, I'm going to be explaining today why I think your Jesus is just too American. See, I didn't realize it before, but my Jesus, and I'm going to start with me before I talk about you, my Jesus came to be more American than biblical. I love Jesus. I read my Bible, I go to church, but when I looked at what was actually shaping like my fears, my reactions, my anger, it wasn't the Sermon on the Mount. It was like social media or cable news or power or this like intrinsic need I have to win. I don't know if you can relate to that. And then I came across this parable in my devotion from Jesus that really kind of changed the way I see all of this. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. And when someone finds it, they sell everything for it. Jesus tells this one line story in Matthew 13:44. A man finds a treasure buried in a field, right? It's not in a palace, it's not in a temple, it's not in like this extravagant modern house or whatever. No, it's in a field. Like it's just hidden under the ground. And when he finds it, he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't negotiate. He doesn't like try to diversify. What does he do? He goes and sells everything for it. But not only that, he does it with joy. It's not out of fear. It's not out of like, it's just purely out of joy. And so Jesus isn't describing with this parable a sense of like obligation. He's describing desire. And so now this raises kind of an uncomfortable question, at least for me. If the kingdom is treasure, then why do so many Christians look miserable? If the kingdom is treasure, why do so many Christians look miserable? And so here's the tension that I began to notice as I dug deeper. Most of us don't reject Jesus. I don't reject Jesus. I love the Bible. I read the Bible. I go to church, as I said before. We just tend to add him to other treasures. And that can look like adding him to nation or to culture or to your Instagram post or to a political identity. And so Jesus does become important to us. We're not denying that, but he doesn't become ultimate. And this isn't new. I want to share with you a story that I believe really effectively illustrates this. So in the 1930s, a German pastor by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer saw this happening in his real time. Germany was humiliated after World War I. And so nationalism began to be at an all-time high where strength became the ultimate value. And slowly, the church at the time began to absorb it, the German church. So you would see like crosses bent into swastikas or altars draped with Nazi flags as well. But the church didn't stop preaching Jesus. I want to make that clear. It just began to preach a Jesus who supported their national dream. And Bonhoeffer, the German pastor, saw obviously the danger of this. And so he wrote in his warning, he gave a warning to the people. He said, "You can say Jesus is Lord and still live like something else is." Bonhoeffer, as a result, had to go back to the Gospel of Matthew. And you're probably wondering why Matthew, because Matthew shows us a Jesus who constantly says this phrase, "You have heard it said, but I say to you." See, Jesus isn't just correcting behavior. He's redefining reality where power looks like weakness, greatness looks like service, and winning looks like losing. I know I just triggered some of y'all with that. And this is what scholars like to call the inverted ethic of the kingdom, where everything familiar, everything that we know, all of a sudden starts to work backwards. But guess what? Jesus never apologizes for it. The earliest Christians didn't grow because they controlled institutions. They grew because they lived differently in public. They elevated women. They cared for the sick, the orphan, the widow. They cared for the sick during plagues. And it was just this whole switch from what was accustomed at the time. They refused emperor worship. And they just did something radical instead. And then they proclaimed something that was just different. Jesus is Lord, and we're not taking it back. This wasn't just theology. It came to be a form of subversion as well. And so now fast forward to today. The Western church, whether you agree with me or not, it is in fact shrinking, especially among the younger generations, my generation. And everyone keeps asking the same question. What happened? And some come to blame secularism, others blame postmodernism or social media or X, Y, and Z. But what if the church didn't decline because it lost influence, but because it gained too much? Stay with me now. Watch this. What if, when it was trying to be relevant, the church, It lost the difference. What if we became, as the church, so good at sounding like culture that no one could tell us apart from it? Salt that loses its saltiness doesn't get thrown out because it's offensive, but because it's utterly useless. When decline happens, the instinct is always the same. I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but we have to fight. We have to go against the culture. We have to win and cancel rap and cancel X, Y, and Z. And we all raise our pitchforks and spears. But here's the problem. The early church didn't win by conquest. They didn't storm institutions. They won by cruciform love. They planted gardens. They practiced what Scripture has always taught. We see the midwives defying Pharaoh. We see Daniel choosing to eat his own food. We see Jeremiah telling the exiles to see the good of Babylon. And so ordinary faithfulness, quiet obedience. And Scripture is very, very clear. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Because here's the issue with going to war and doing this whole culture fight. There will be a winner in the end. And let's say we win, right? The Western church or just the church. How can you win a war and not feel a sense of pride? That's when it becomes dangerous. And so here's the resolution I came to find as a result of all this. The church doesn't regain influence by chasing power. It regains influence by rediscovering its treasure. The early church grew because they loved people that culture discarded. Women, the sick, the elderly, the foreigner. They treated outsiders like family. And eventually the empire had no choice but to take them seriously. And so the kingdom at that time didn't advance by force and this war and we're going to fight, but by fascination, because the people around them saw their lives and they said, well, I wonder what kind of treasure makes them live like that. I love America. Don't get me wrong, but America isn't the church. Jesus didn't die for a nation. He died for the whole world. And so following him will always put us at odds with something. But here's the invitation that he makes us. What if obedience isn't loss, but actually discovery? And what if Jesus isn't taking your treasure, but replacing it with something so much better? The man in the parable that we saw, he sold everything. And it wasn't out of fear, but out of pure joy. So here's my challenge for you this week. I want you to ask yourself just one question. What actually has my allegiance? Because whatever that is, that's your treasure. Jesus isn't too demanding. He's honestly too valuable. And once you see the treasure, well, you can never unsee it. We'll catch you on the next one.